Hello and welcome to the analysis of the Hindu newspaper dated December 7th, 2022. In this video, we are going to talk about two important newspaper articles. Now, these articles are important, very significant for the civil services examination, but this doesn't discard the fact that other articles which were present in the Hindu newspaper weren't important. So, we have presented a list of all the important newspaper articles which are present from the Hindu newspaper. Now, these articles are important, very significant, but they do not require that kind of understanding, and that is why we are going to stick to just two important newspaper articles which we have selected from this particular list. Now, this particular list of all the important newspaper articles is also downloadable from our Telegram channel. So, do join us on Telegram to get all the important PDFs important for the civil services examination, and subscribe to this channel to never miss an update from the bureaucratic way. Now with this, let's now head to the first important newspaper article. Now this particular newspaper article is regarding the World Bank projections regarding the growth. Now India, earlier according to the World Bank, was going to see a 6.5% growth in the month of October. In the month of October, they have presented that India's growth was going to be 6.5%, but now they have increased it to 6.9%. Now this particular upgradation in the economic growth projections is due to various factors. We are going to talk about the various factors involved in it, but before that, where was this particular information present? Because this particular information is present in the newspaper, no doubt, but this particular information was first presented in a report which is titled as Navigating the Storm India Development Report. Now this particular report has been presented by the World Bank itself, and that is why it becomes significant to understand what was written in this particular report, which is India Development Report, and which has been titled as Navigating the Storm. So now there were many reasons for this particular revisions from 6.5% to 6.9%. The first reason is the strong growth. We have seen a strong growth in the quarter which is July to September quarter of 2022 to 2023, which has seen 6.3% growth. Now you may see that it is very low, but this particular low growth is also despite the inflationary pressures and tighter financial conditions. When the world is crippling from all the economic disasters, the India has shown 6.3% growth, which is despite the inflationary pressures, which is despite the tighter financial conditions. Now this is something to flex about. Now this particular thing has happened only because of two factors. The two factors are strong private consumption and investment, and the second one is government's focus on bolstering capital expenditure. And this particular report suggests that a well-crafted and prudent policy response to the global spillovers is helping India navigate global and domestic challenges. Our policies are very prudent. Our policies are not letting us get affected by all the economic disasters in the world, and that is why India is on the right track. Apart from it, this particular report also talks about the jobless growth. Now jobs are being created in India, but they are all in the informal sector. Now the informal sector in India is largely unaccounted for. If we see that the growth has been seen, if we account for this informal sector as well, then there is a job growth in India. There is no jobless growth in India. And apart from it, this particular report also talks about some of the future predictions. Now the bank expects the Indian economy to grow at a slightly slower, that is 6.6% in 2023 to 2024, as a challenging external environment and faltering global growth will affect its economic outlook through different channels. Now the decline in the world growth is going to affect India because a minus 1% growth in the United States is going to have an effect of minus 0.4% growth in India. Now this particular effect is very low because other countries, other emerging economies, and the EU and the China is going to have more effect, and this effect is going to be 1.5% larger for them as compared to India. So India is on a very right track. The monetary policies and the fiscal policies are on the right track. We can see from this particular data, right? Now This particular report also talks about some of the cautions on the policy front that India needs to take, because all of these reports are basically to form all the prudent policies, all the tight policies, so that India does not get affected by all of the economic turmoil in the world. Now, the report cautions about the trade-offs between trying to limit the adverse impact of the global spillovers on the growth and available policy space, and the other effect is that the RBI's gradual withdrawal of liquidity and policy rate hikes have been aimed at anchoring inflation expectations. You need to control the inflation, and that is what the RBI is doing. But this may also lead to an increased borrowing cost, which, along with elevated input prices, have potentially constrained the private investment. Now, the central bank's management of short-term volatility in exchange rates has contributed to a decline in the reserves. Now that there has been a decline in the reserves, but they are still at a relatively high level. So we can rest be assured that India is on the right front. And apart from it, the strong revenue growth would largely offset India's higher subsidiary bill and lower fuel taxes, but these measures have slowed the pace of fiscal consolidation. And apart from it, the confluence of multiple challenges on the external front poses a challenge to India's growth trajectory. But balanced policy making will help India navigate global headwinds. The world is going through an economic decline, right? The growth, if we have seen, is has been negative in many cases, but India can navigate all of the storms presented by the decline in the growth in the world scenario by making better policies. So we expect that there is going to be better policy making from the RBI as well as the government. And apart from it, a widening goods trade deficit driven by rising imports and softening exports has expanded current account deficit to 2.8% of GDP in quarter 2 from 1.5% in the first quarter. So we need to increase our exports so that we can get more money out of the other countries. We can help the other countries by supplying our products, but it needs to also be seen that there is rising imports. Now this has led to a increase in the current account deficit. For example, in the quarter second, we have seen the 1.5% CAD, but this has there was a 1.5% CAD in the current account deficit in the first quarter, but in the second quarter we have seen that there was a 2.8% current account deficit. Now we need to take the whole year into account and not see into the just the quarters of it, but we can see that there is a rise in the exports, which is somewhat less beneficial to us. But India scores better than the Philippines and Thailand on this metric, so we can rest be assured that India is on the right track. However, the trade deficit will be somewhat offset by resilient services trade surplus, because we provide services to the world. We are a services driven economy, right? And that is how these particular trade deficits can be offset by the services trade surplus, right? So these are some of the cautions which have been presented by this particular report, which is titled as Navigating the Storm India Development Report. Now we have talked about the World Bank group presenting this particular report. So let's talk about what is World Bank. So World Bank is basically a conglomeration, or it has 5 institutions, right? So it is of 189 member countries. It has 189 member countries, and the World Bank is a unique global partnership. Now there are 5 institutions working for them, and they are working towards sustainable solutions that reduce poverty, and they build shared prosperity in the developing countries. Now the World Bank works with country governments, it also works with the private sectors, it also works with the civil society organizations, it works with the regional development banks, think tanks, and all of the other issues also are covered in this particular World Bank, right? So it works with all of these countries in order to make the policy makers enable it helps to enable the policy makers make more informed policy decisions. This is the function of the World Bank, right? Now let's talk about the 5 institutions in the World Bank, because it has 5 institutions or working institutions. So let's talk about it. So the first institution we have over here is the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which basically provides loans, credits and grants. And the second one we have is the IDA, which is International Development Association, which provides low or no interest loans to the low income countries. Then we have the International Finance Corporation, which provides investment advice and asset management to companies and governments. Then we have the Multilateral Guarantee Agency, which ensures lenders and investors against political risks such as war. And then we have the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, which basically settles investment disputes between investors and the countries. So these are the five institutions and these are some of the functions of it. Now let's talk about the what are the main goals of the World Bank. So the first goal is to end extreme poverty by 2030, and the second goal of the World Bank is to boost shared prosperity of the poorest 40% of the population in all of the countries. So these are the goals of the World Bank. Now let's talk about the what are the major reports of the World Bank. Now these major reports are going to be very important because you can use all of the data presented in this particular report directly into your means examination, right? So the first report we have is the ease of doing business. Now this particular publication of this particular report has been stopped for I don't know what reasons. But the second report we have is the human capital index. The third one is the world development report. Now world development report is very significant, right? You can directly use the data without any worry, right? And apart from it, which has also other recent publications as well. For example, the World Bank paper on the India's poverty. We have the South Asia economic focus, and also we have the Groundwell's report. So these are the major reports that the World Bank present. We have talked about the World Bank. We have also talked about this particular report, which we have discussed, right? Which is Navigating the Storm India Development Report. So this is it regarding this particular newspaper article. Let's now head to the next important newspaper article. Now this particular newspaper article is regarding the TRAI, which is the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, and it proposes to help callers identify spammers. Alright, so now this particular article says that on November 29, the TRAI, which is the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, floated a consultation paper seeking comments about potential introduction of calling name presentation feature. What is the CNAP feature? So CNAP feature is basically somewhat like the Truecaller that you use. Truecaller is what? Truecaller is used to identify all the spam calls or who is calling you, right? So now the feature would provide an individual with information about the calling party. Now, whenever you receive the call, the Truecaller shows you the name of the particular entity who is calling you, and the similar feature is going to be by the CNAP. What's important is that it has been now or this idea has been presented by the TRAI, that is the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, which is significant. Now this particular floating paper also talks about many of the things, but we'll talk about it later. But before that, let's talk about the idea behind the CNAP. So the idea is to ensure that telephone subscribers are able to make an informed choice about incoming calls and curb harassments by unknown and spam callers. This is the basic function of the CNAP presented by or this particular idea has been presented by the TRAI, that is the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, in its floating paper. Now what is the particular purpose of this CNAP? So since subscribers are not given the name and identity of the callers, they sometimes choose not to answer them, believing it could be unsolicited commercial communication from unregistered telemarketers. We choose not to receive the calls from the people whom numbers we have not saved, right? So but this particular CNAP will give us the names and identity of the caller, which will give us more informed choice about whether to pick up that particular call or not. Now this could lead to genuine calls being unanswered, but this problem is going to be solved by the CNAP. And additionally, there have been rising concerns about the robocalls. Now robocalls are basically calls made automatically using IT enabled systems with pre-recorded voice. We have also the problem of the spam calls, and we also have the fraudulent calls. and all of these particular things are going to be all of these problems are going to be solved by the CNAP. So we already have the entities like the Truecaller or the anti-spam, or we have also have the Bharat Caller ID. But what is the purpose of this? Why should not we use the third-party apps? Why we need to use the CNAP? So Truecaller's 2021 Global Spam and Scam Report revealed that average number of spam callers per user each month in India stood at around 6.8, while 16.8 billion, while total spam volumes received by its users were in excess of 3.8 billion calls in October 11. Now, the smartphone users at present rely on inbuilt features or third-party apps to mark and tackle the spam calls. We all know that. However, as per the regulator, their reliance on the crowd-sourced data may not be reliable. This particular data cannot be reliable, and some of the calls may skip through all of this particular process, and you can get all the spam calls, right? So now, are there concerns about the privacy? Now the CNAP uses, or it identifies the name and identity of the callers. So now there rises the concerns about the privacy as well. So it is not particularly clear about how the CNAP mechanism would be balance the caller's right to remain anonymous, an essential component of the right to privacy. Now it is to be seen in parallel with the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill 2022, which has a clause on deemed consent lacking adequate safeguards, including sharing of data with the third parties. All right. So now let's talk about the fact that would the provisions be enough? Would the provisions presented by the CNAP or this particular floating paper, would they be enough? So the thing is that previously telemarketers were required to register as promotional numbers, making it easier to identify and block them. But the telemarketers came up with a very important strategy, very good strategy, right? Now the marketers have started deploying people who are not necessarily part of the entity setup, but rather at home workers to whom work is being outsourced. Now these particular people who are outsourced, or the work being outsourced, is through, or they call through the SIM cards. Now the SIM cards are not registered with that particular company, but they are registered with that particular individual who is calling, right? And this raises a question whether the spam calls by these individuals who are sitting at home calling can be curtailed. Now the government must also invest in digital literacy, skilling citizens to navigate and use the tech better, ensuring they do not share their data indiscriminately and are informed about dangers such as financial frauds and spoofing. Alright, so these are some of the provisions which we consider that they are not enough, or on these policy fronts there can be an improvement. So this is it regarding this particular newspaper article, and this is it for the day. Thank you from my side. Do like and share the video and subscribe to this channel. Have a good day. Bye.